I speak 9 languages. Waitress says proudly. Millionaire laughs until he realizes the truth. Sometimes the most profound lessons come from the people we least expect to teach us. On a crisp autumn evening in downtown Chicago, the golden lights of Rosewood Bistro cast warm shadows across empty tables as the dinner rush finally wound down. Behind the polished counter, 28-year-old Sophia wiped down glasses with practiced ease, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that had seen better days. She moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned to make every motion count, every smile genuine despite aching feet and a back that reminded her of 12-hour shifts. What she didn't know was that in just a few minutes, a conversation would begin that would change not just her evening, but the life of a man who thought he understood the value of hard work. The autumn wind rattled the bistro's windows as if announcing that something important was about to unfold. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Sophia had been working at Rosewood Bistro for 3 years, ever since she'd arrived in Chicago with nothing but determination and a worn suitcase. The upscale restaurant attracted wealthy clientele who appreciated fine dining and impeccable service, though most barely glanced at the young woman who ensured their water glasses never emptied and their meals arrived exactly as ordered. She'd grown accustomed to being invisible, a fixture in the background of other people's important conversations and celebrations. Tonight felt different, though. The usual evening crowd had thinned earlier than normal, leaving only a handful of diners scattered throughout the elegant dining room. Sophia welcomed the quieter pace. It gave her mind time to wander to the textbooks waiting in her studio apartment, the ones she studied by lamplight after each shift ended. Medical terminology, anatomy, chemistry. Subjects that felt like puzzle pieces slowly forming a picture of the future she was building one page at a time. The front door chimed, and Sophia looked up to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit stride in with the confident air of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. James Patterson, though Sophia didn't know his name yet, was exactly that kind of man. At 42, he'd built a technology empire that had made him worth more than some small country's annual budgets. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his watch cost more than most people's cars, and he carried himself with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been told no. James chose a table near the window, pulling out his phone before he'd even settled into his chair. Sophia approached with a warm smile, the kind she'd perfected over countless interactions with demanding customers. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Rosewood Bistro. Can I start you with something to drink?" James barely looked up from his screen. "Whatever your most expensive wine is. And I'll need the check quickly. I have a conference call with Tokyo in an hour." His tone suggested this was a routine inconvenience, not a request. "Of course, sir. That would be our 2015 Chateau Margaux. It's quite exceptional." Sophia's voice remained pleasant despite his dismissive manner. She'd learned long ago not to take rudeness personally. Wealthy customers often treated service staff like furniture that happened to speak. "Fine, whatever. Just bring it." James waved her away, already turning back to his phone, where stock prices and merger documents demanded his attention. In his world, people like Sophia existed solely to facilitate his comfort and convenience. He'd built his fortune on efficiency, on eliminating anything that didn't directly contribute to his success, and he viewed most human interactions through that same cold lens. As Sophia walked toward the wine cellar, she couldn't shake the feeling that this particular customer carried a weight beyond his obvious wealth. Something in his posture, the way he held his shoulders rigid with tension, suggested a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to simply breathe. She'd seen it before in other high-powered clients, success that came at the cost of connection, achievement that left its bearer hollow inside. What Sophia didn't realize was that James Patterson was about to have the kind of evening that would remind him what he'd lost in his relentless pursuit of more. Sophia returned with a bottle of wine, its deep burgundy label catching the candlelight as she approached James's table. He was deep in conversation, his Bluetooth earpiece flashing as he gestured impatiently at whatever crisis demanded his immediate attention. "No, Rodriguez, that's not acceptable. I don't care if the Shanghai team thinks the timeline is aggressive. We launch in 6 weeks, period." She waited quietly beside his table, bottle in hand, until he ended the call with an exasperated sigh. Problems with international expansion, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Everyone always wants more time, more money, more excuses. Sophia began the careful ritual of presenting the wine, explaining its origins and characteristics as she'd been trained. James waved impatiently through her explanation. Just pour it. I'm sure it's fine. His dismissive tone carried the weight of a man accustomed to cutting through pleasantries. Of course, sir. Sophia's response was measured and professional. As she poured, James's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message, and she couldn't help but notice the frustration that crossed his features as he read it. Everything all right? The question slipped out before Sophia could stop herself. In her family, asking about someone's well-being was as natural as breathing, but she immediately worried she'd overstepped. James looked up, genuinely surprised that his waitress had spoken beyond taking his order. It's nothing you'd understand. Business complications. His tone suggested the conversation was over, but something about Sophia's genuine concern made him pause. My company's trying to expand into Southeast Asia, but every partner we approach wants everything explained in their native language. It's inefficient. Sophia nodded thoughtfully as she finished pouring his wine. That does sound challenging. Communication barriers can definitely complicate business relationships. Her response was careful, respectful, but there was something in her tone that suggested deeper understanding than James expected. Exactly. James found himself continuing despite his usual reluctance to discuss business with service staff. I keep telling them we can use translators, but they insist on direct communication. It's like they don't trust that important details won't get lost in translation. That makes sense though, Sophia said gently, setting the bottle on the table. When someone speaks to you in your own language, especially about something important, it shows respect. It tells you they've taken time to understand not just your words, but your culture. James paused, his wine glass halfway to his lips. Something about her response surprised him. It wasn't the mindless agreement he was used to receiving. You sound like you speak from experience. Sophia smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her tired features. I speak 9 languages, actually. When you grow up moving between different countries, you learn that language is about more than just words. It's about connection. James set down his glass, his full attention now focused on the young woman he'd barely noticed minutes before. 9 languages. His tone carried a mixture of skepticism and newfound interest. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Yes, sir. Spanish, English, Mandarin, French, German, Portuguese, Arabic, Italian, and Polish. Sophia's voice carried quiet pride, but no boastfulness. James laughed, the sound sharp and disbelieving. Right. And I suppose you learned all of those working here. What he didn't realize was that his laughter was about to reveal far more about his own limitations than hers. Sophia's smile faltered slightly at James's dismissive laughter, but she maintained her composure with the grace of someone who'd faced doubt before. Actually, I learned them growing up. My father worked for the United Nations, so our family moved frequently. Each new country meant a new language, new schools, new ways of seeing the world. James's expression shifted from amusement to skepticism. In his experience, people often embellish their qualifications to impress wealthy clients. The United Nations, he repeated, his tone suggesting he didn't believe a word. So your father was some kind of diplomat? He was a humanitarian coordinator, Sophia replied quietly. We lived in refugee camps and crisis zones where multiple languages weren't just helpful, they were necessary for survival. When you're helping families who've lost everything, speaking their language in their darkest moment can mean the difference between hope and despair. Something in her voice gave James pause, but his cynicism ran deep. Convenient story. Look, I appreciate good service, but you don't need to impress me with elaborate backgrounds. I just want my meal and my check. Sophia felt the familiar sting of being dismissed, but this time something deeper stirred within her. She thought of her father's words when she'd called him last week, worried about whether her dreams of medical school were worth the struggle. Mija, he'd said in Spanish, never let anyone's inability to see your worth diminish the light you carry. I understand your skepticism, Sophia said calmly. But respectfully, sir, my background isn't a story designed to impress anyone. It's simply who I am. She paused, studying his face. You mentioned your expansion into Southeast Asia earlier. What specific regions are you targeting? James's laugh was harsher this time. What could you possibly know about international business expansion? Probably more than you think. Sophia's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the silk now. I spent 2 years in refugee camps along the Thai-Myanmar border, translating between aid workers and displaced families. I've seen how cultural misunderstandings can derail even the most well-intentioned efforts. This is ridiculous, James muttered, but his phone was buzzing again, and the name Chen Weiming appeared on the screen, his potential business partner in Singapore who'd been avoiding his calls for weeks. Sophia glanced at the phone. Chen Weiming. That's a Taiwanese name, probably a second-generation immigrant, given the hyphenation. If he's avoiding your calls, it might not be about the business proposal itself. James stared at her, his finger hovering over the decline button. What do you mean? In many Asian cultures, direct confrontation is avoided. If he's not responding to your calls, he might be trying to communicate displeasure or concern without directly rejecting you. It's a face-saving measure for both parties. The phone stopped buzzing, and James realized he'd let another call go to voicemail. His expansion timeline was already behind schedule, and Chen's partnership was crucial for breaking into the Singaporean market. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Sophia straightened, preparing to step back into her role as invisible service staff. I should let you enjoy your wine in peace. But as she turned to leave, James found himself saying, Wait. James stared at his phone screen, where 7 missed calls from Chen Weiming now glared back at him like accusations. For the first time in months, he felt genuinely uncertain about a business decision. What would you suggest? The question came out harder than he intended, his pride wrestling with curiosity. Sophia turned back, recognizing the crack in his armor. May I? She gestured toward the empty chair across from him. James nodded, surprising himself. Mr. Chen's probably not avoiding you because he doesn't want the partnership, Sophia began, her voice taking on the confident tone of someone who'd navigated cultural complexities her entire life. He's likely trying to communicate that something in your approach isn't aligning with his values or business practices. James's jaw tightened. My approach has built a billion-dollar company. I'm sure it has, Sophia replied without sarcasm. But what works in American boardrooms doesn't always translate directly to other cultures. In Singapore, business relationships often begin with personal connections. Trust comes before contracts. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes earnest. When you call Mr. Chen, do you open with business immediately, or do you ask about his family, his health, his recent travels? James realized with uncomfortable clarity that every conversation with Chen had begun with quarterly projections and market analysis. He doesn't call me to chat about his personal life. Because you haven't created space for him to do so, Sophia said gently. In many Asian business cultures, showing interest in someone as a person before discussing profit margins demonstrates respect. It says you see him as more than just a means to your expansion goals. The weight of her words settled over James like cold water. His phone buzzed with a text from Chen. Mr. Patterson, I believe we may have different approaches to partnership. Perhaps we should reconsider our arrangement. James looked up at Sophia, panic flickering in his eyes. He's backing out. Not necessarily, Sophia said quickly. He's giving you an opportunity to adjust your approach. Try calling him back, but this time start differently. Ask him about his family, his business philosophy, what success means to him beyond just profit. I don't know anything about his personal life. Then learn. Sophia's voice was firm but kind. Real business partnerships aren't just about contracts and profit sharing. They're about understanding who you're working with and why they do what they do. James stared at his phone, then back at Sophia. You really think that would make a difference? I think Mr. Chen has been waiting for you to see him as a person, not just a gateway to the Singaporean market. Sophia's voice carried the wisdom of someone who'd watched her father build bridges across cultural divides for years. Sometimes the most profitable business decision is the most human one. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. James took a deep breath and dialed Chen's number. When the call connected, instead of launching into his usual business pitch, he found himself saying something he'd never said in a professional call before. Mr. Chen, before we discuss business, I wanted to ask, how is your family? The long pause that followed made James's heart race, but then he heard something he'd never heard from Chen before, genuine warmth in his voice. Mr. Patterson. Chen's voice carried surprise and something that sounded like relief. Thank you for asking. My daughter just started university, studying international relations, actually. She hopes to bridge cultural gaps in business, much like what we're attempting to do. James felt something shift inside his chest, a recognition of shared humanity he'd forgotten was possible in business relationships. That's wonderful. It must make you proud. The words felt foreign on his tongue, but also surprisingly natural. It does, Chen replied, and James could hear the smile in his voice. You know, I've been hesitant about our partnership not because of your business plan. It's quite sound, but because I wasn't sure if you understood that in Singapore, we believe success means more than just profit margins. As the conversation continued, James found himself genuinely curious about Chen's perspective on sustainable business growth, his commitment to employee welfare, and his vision for technology that served communities rather than just shareholders. What had started as a desperate attempt to salvage a deal became a genuine exchange of ideas and values. 30 minutes later, when James ended the call, he had not only secured the partnership but gained something he hadn't expected: respect for a fellow human being whose priorities extended beyond quarterly reports. Chen had agreed to fly to Chicago the following week, not just to sign contracts, but to spend time getting to know James's company culture and vision. James looked across the table at Sophia, who had quietly waited while he rebuilt a bridge he didn't even realize he'd been burning. I think I owe you an apology, he said, his voice softer than it had been all evening. And probably a thank you as well. Sophia smiled, the kind of radiant expression that transforms an entire face. You don't owe me anything, sir. I'm just glad things worked out with Mr. Chen. No, I don't owe you anything. James paused, really looking at her for the first time. I made assumptions about who you are based on where you work. That was wrong of me. We all make assumptions sometimes, Sophia replied graciously. The important thing is what we do when we realize we were wrong. James thought about his conversation with Chen, about the warmth that had entered the businessman's voice when James had asked about his daughter's dreams. What are you studying? He asked Sophia. Beyond languages, I mean. Pre-med, Sophia said, her eyes lighting up. I want to work in international humanitarian medicine, like my father, but as a doctor instead of a coordinator. James nodded slowly, understanding dawning. And the 9 languages, they'll help you connect with patients who've lost everything. Exactly. Sophia's voice carried quiet passion. When someone's afraid or in pain, hearing their native language can provide comfort that transcends medical treatment. As James signed his check, adding a tip larger than Sophia's usual nightly take-home pay, he realized the evening had taught him something valuable about the difference between hearing words and truly listening. Chen's partnership would likely make him millions, but Sophia's lesson about seeing people's full humanity was worth far more. Walking to his car, James found himself thinking not about profit margins or expansion timelines, but about his own forgotten dreams and the bridges he'd burned in pursuit of success. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when we least expect them, with people who remind us who we used to be before we forgot how to simply be human. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of unexpected connections and rediscovered humanity.